Father and son's ordinary hunting trip takes a wild turn after they spot something in the dirt. When a serious hunter ventures into the woods during hunting season, they have one thing on their mind: get their target in the crosshairs and take the perfect shot. Returning home with a heap of wild game is always the goal, but sometimes an unexpected turn of events changes plans. When Ryle Gordon and his stepfather headed into the Idaho woods for a hunting trip, they assumed it would be like any other trip. However, shortly into their journey, they came across an eerie sign that rewrote the entire purpose of their excursion. Ryle Gordon and his stepfather, Chris Trumbick, loved to hunt. As a young boy, Ryle loved talking to Chris about hunting and always admired his massive set of antlers adorning the home's walls. Chris loved hunting so much that he had a second home, a cabin out in the woods of Hayden, Idaho. Every hunting season, he and Ryle would take a trip to the cabin for a few days and see what kind of game they could bring back home. Early one weekend morning in November of 2018, Chris woke Ryle up to get a jump start to the cabin. They were going to spend the day tracking deer, and hopefully Ryle would take down his very first buck. However, when they arrived at the trail, they were greeted with a startling sight. There were dozens of people dressed in bright orange vests and several trucks with the words "Search and Rescue" written on the side. Something was happening in the Hayden forest. Rescuers told Chris a 19-year-old girl named Catherine Ogle was missing, and she was thought to be somewhere in the wooded area. The problem was that Catherine had a cognitive development of a 10-year-old, so it was imperative she was found soon. As he was just 15 himself, Ryle was shaken by this news. He couldn't imagine trying to survive alone in the thick forest on his own. Even though he basically grew up in the wilderness, he was well aware of the dangers it posed if you were caught off guard. Chris and Ryle headed into the woods after speaking with the rescuer. Even though they were there to hunt, they promised to keep an eye out for clues about Catherine. The duo didn't need to go far into the woods before they spotted something that stopped them dead in their tracks. It wasn't a massive deer, buck, or bear, or any animal for that matter. Scrawled in the dirt in front of them was the word "Help." Kyle saw it first and yelled out to Chris. The two men stared down at the letters, trying to determine what it could mean. To be honest, it shook them up a bit. Having decades of hunting experience, Chris's first instinct was that the message was left by hunters who needed help hauling in a massive animal they'd killed. It wasn't unusual for game to be so large it took a team of men to transport it out of the woods. However, Ryle thought of a totally different theory. Maybe, he supposed, it was written by Catherine? After explaining the thought to his stepfather, Chris's face grew concerned. Ryle was probably correct. The message could have been written by Catherine as soon as she realized she was lost. Maybe she had the wherewithal to leave some kind of clue for rescuers. Chris and Ryle immediately returned to the search party and told them what they'd found. A few members of the party radioed to their partners, telling them about the message. Almost immediately, a helicopter took off, scanning the area in hopes to locate the missing teen. But night soon fell and the chopper was called off. But Ryle and Chris had a gut feeling to investigate one more area of the woods. It was an area near their cabin, and the rescue team hadn't explored it yet. The two men led the way through the night using flashlights. At their cabin, they slowly opened the front door, hoping they'd see Catherine somewhere inside. Unfortunately, the cabin was empty, although it did look like someone could have been rummaging through their things. Chris, Ryle, and the rescue team began scouring the nearby area, calling out to Catherine. However, they realized they couldn't hear over the sound of their engines. They killed the noise, called out once more, and listened. Suddenly, from not too far off in the distance, a faint voice called out, "Hello!" Stunned, they followed the sounds until they finally reached a sleeping bag nestled between the trees. In the sleeping bag was Catherine. They'd found her at last. Catherine was clearly overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of so many people, but at the same time incredibly grateful. She was safe. Although she seemed physically okay, professionals brought Catherine to the Kootenai Health Center for a full checkup. Naturally, she was shaken up, but considering what she'd been through, she fared pretty well physically. Ryle and Chris's day of hunting was completely changed by the message they found in the dirt. Although many of the rescuers and local news hailed them as heroes, the duo just chalked it up to being at the right place at the right time.